Hey gang, John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter here. We are trying to get our stuff linked and going live uh, in Instagram, and I think we finally got that hooked up. So yay! All right, and now X is not working, so let's go ahead and remove that. Sorry about everyone on X. If you are on the Logistics Lounge X, that you should still be good. My X, we'll have to fix that at another time. In the meantime, folks, thank you. Welcome again. I am John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, and thank you for joining us for part 5 of our fraud prevention series. In part 5, we are going to be talking about the ways to identify and defend yourselves from double broker issues. I'm sorry, it's about responses to double broker issues. We did defenses last week. Man, I haven't had my coffee yet. Give me a break. But hey, it's the start of a new day, and it also means it's the start of new opportunities for all of us. So let's go ahead and get things started. But first, we need to make sure we pay a little bit of homage to our good friends at AccuBid Pro. If you're going to survive in this industry, the best way to do so is knowing your cost per mile. And the best way to track your cost per mile is through AccuBid Pro.
Do you know your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable, even including a more detailed breakdown of each bid. Download the app today and get your 30-day free trial of AccuBid Pro, available on the App Store and Google Play. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with AccuBid Pro.
Before I really get going into today's presentation, I do want to give a shout out to Dale Prax and Freight Validate. And the reason why I want to do that is he made a very good post on LinkedIn yesterday talking about some of the dangers about email being hacked in order for scammers to learn different information about loads without the carrier or the broker knowing it. So a very important thing that everybody needs to do, and we will cover it again next week when we're talking about procedures that you need to put into place to protect yourself from double brokering. But make sure that you go into your email browsers, whether that's Outlook or Gmail or whatever you do, and double check for forwarding rules that you don't put in yourself. If these scammers are hacking your emails, they want to go into your forwarding rules and look for keywords such as rate confirmation or BOL or something along those lines. And that forwards emails to them, which is how they're getting information about your loads without you saying anything to anybody. So go and check your forwarding information in your Gmail, your Outlook, etc., and make sure you don't have rules in there that you didn't already put in. That's a very important public service announcement. Thank you very much to Dale Prax at Freight Validate for putting that out there. We will repost that on LinkedIn for everybody later today so that you guys can see that. Now, let's go ahead and get on with the subject of the day, double brokering responses. Now, in previous parts, we talked about what double brokering is. We talked about how to discover it. We talked about the different signs that exist that help people identify whether or not they're dealing with a double broker situation. This is how you handle those situations when you find yourself in them. So we're going to start off with the carrier responses. Uh, if you're in possession of the cargo, which is the ideal situation to be in, it's sitting in the back of the truck, and you get that weird feeling in the back of your neck, hair starts standing up in the back of your neck, your spidey sense starts tingling, whatever it is, then you need to take a few steps. First and foremost, what I recommend is you do not let the potential scammer, the broker you've been dealing with, do not let them know that you have a suspicion. What I would do is briefly pull over and try to sort out what your situation is. If the broker calls me and says, "Hey, I see you on tracking, you pulled over, what's going on?" "Oh man, I just stopped the fuel." But that buys you enough time to sort out what exactly is the situation you're dealing with. If you think you have a bad load on your back, that you have a double brokered load, you need to determine who the real broker is as quickly as possible. If you do not know how to do this, you need to reach out to somebody who can. Hello, talk to me. I can certainly help you identify who the real broker is, get you in touch with them, and figure out whether or not you are unknowingly complicit in a stolen cargo scheme or whatever. But whatever you do, make sure that the scammer does not know you have a suspicion until you have a new rate confirmation in hand. Because as long as the scammer has operational control of that cargo, you could have some problems. And believe me, they will threaten you. They will threaten to call the police. They will threaten all kinds of stuff. Okay. Find qualified help like me, and we can get you squared away very quickly. Once you identify who the real broker is, then you want to make sure the real broker gets a copy of the BOL that you have, the scammer's rate confirmation, and any pictures of the load, especially if you have any identifying marks on the load, like there's a lot number or something along those lines. A lot of pallets will have pallet slips or placards on them. You want to make sure you get a picture of that. That is going to help prove to the real broker that you actually have the cargo on board and will allow them to verify who you are. Once they are able to do that, then they can tell you, hey, you think you're going to South Carolina, but the cargo is actually supposed to go to Tennessee. Well, you kind of need to know that so that you're not dropping the cargo off at the crook's warehouse so the crook can steal it. You don't want to be involved in that mess. So you'll verify the destination. And once you know the real destination, resume transit. Continue going in the right direction. Or if that means turn around, you turn around. But whatever you do, you need to keep moving. Do not stop and hold the cargo any longer than is necessary, because there are limitations as to what you can do legally when it comes to holding cargo, which is why there's a huge accusation out there about holding cargo hostage. You have to be very careful. Once you know where the cargo is really supposed to go, you need to go ahead and start moving in that direction. You can work out the details with the real broker as you go, but you need to get moving. If the cargo has already been delivered, this is where it gets tricky. Okay. If the cargo is already delivered and the POD was sent to the scammer, you are in a lot of trouble at this point, because the POD is what the scammer needs in order for them to get paid. So what typically happens is you, Mr. Carrier, are not going to get paid at that point, at least not by the guy who you booked the load with. They're going to ghost you. And then you have no choice but to recourse with the real broker. If you are in this situation, you didn't get paid by the scammer, you know you got scammed, or you at least suspect it, then you need to get with a collections professional. Okay. The law says that you can recourse with the beneficial cargo owner. That's 49 CFR 377. However, because there's a broker in the mix somewhere, we, as a professional courtesy, give the broker, the real broker, a fighting chance to go ahead and deal with the situation. So make sure that you get with somebody who can actually do that for you and can better represent you. Uh, Calling a broker in a very angry state about your situation does not help. You need somebody calm, collected, who can negotiate with a real broker to help you out of your situation, because there's a lot that's going on. Um, Especially if this has happened in the past, you've been through the situation, you hauled a double brokered load, you didn't get paid, and you just thought to yourself, man, I shouldn't have done that. My mistake. I screwed up. You know what? I'm just going to eat this because that's the cost of doing business. Wrong. Hello, if you haul the load, you have the right to be paid. 49 CFR 377. You know, it's where the term that the final mile carrier must always be paid comes from. So if you are in a situation where you didn't get paid for a load that you hauled, as long as you have the physical BOL, I'm talking about the actual piece of paper, the one that's been balled up in your truck that has coffee stains on it, that piece of paper that has actual pen and ink signatures on it, not a scan, not a photocopy, not a picture, the actual piece of paper. That piece of paper, you walk into court with that, you get paid. End of story. There is no argument on that. So you can still get paid if you didn't get paid on a load in the past. Here are the restrictions. If it is an interstate load, that means it went anywhere in the lower 48, then you have 18 months to file a claim for payment. That's a year and a half. So if in the past year and a half you did a load, you didn't get paid for it, find a collections professional and they can help you sort that out and probably get you paid something for that load. If it's an intra-state load, meaning it was hauled within the borders of a single state, then that varies depending upon what state you're in. Some states it's 24 months, some states it's 36 months, some states it's even longer. I think there's a state that has a 10-year statute of limitations on it. But get with a collections professional. They can help you. And if you are going to get with a collections professional, make sure they're licensed and bonded. By the way, I'm licensed and bonded as a collections professional. So you can always reach out to me and I can help you with that kind of situation. If you are a carrier and you ended up, man, my phone just won't stop blowing up. If you ended up contributing to the theft of a cargo, so you have a broker who was impersonated, booked you on a load, directed you, usually with a blind BOL, to go to another location, and they ended up transloading your cargo and stole it, you could be in real trouble here. It's unknown really who the real broker is, and your situation, your exact situation is really unknown until we know who that is as well. If you ended up dropping the cargo at what turned out to be the wrong destination, anything other than the originally intended destination of the cargo, then you may not get paid for the load. That is just a fact. If the load doesn't get to where it's supposed to go, you're not going to get paid. So if you are in a situation where you realize you dropped the cargo at the wrong place, the cargo is probably stolen, call the police. Call the police in the jurisdiction of where you dropped the load first and foremost, because that is your only chance of possibly getting the load recovered so we can finally get to the right destination. But again, there's no legal recourse when it comes to getting paid. You probably will not get paid for the load unless you're able to recover the cargo. And I can tell you guys from experience, when these cargoes are stolen this way, you go to a transload facility, they unload you, you pull off. Usually in 15 to 30 minutes, they've already reloaded it onto another truck and have already moved it on. We call it cargo laundering. And they sit there and they move it from site to site to site to make sure that there's no one following them, and they lose, and whoever is watching the cargo ends up losing track of it. It's a bad situation. So you've got to be careful if you ever go through that kind of stuff. Now, if you're dealing with an impersonated shipper, Okay, so you're dealing with a real broker who gives you real documents, and it was the broker who got duped by who they think is a shipper. The real broker, once they figure out all this is going on, they have no choice. They need to call the FBI. If it's intrastate, they'll call the state police. Um, and they're going to do everything they can to cooperate with the investigation. And carriers, you need to as well. Provide whatever information that you can. But keep in mind, in this particular scenario, the real carrier still has to get paid, because even though the shipper may have been fraudulent, the documentation and the contracts issued by the real broker to the real carrier are still valid and in force. So the real broker still has to pay the real carrier as contracted. So very important distinction there. So the primary lesson for a carrier when you're trying to deal with a double broker situation is, if it doesn't seem right, investigate it, figure it out. And there are people out there who can help you do that, usually for free, myself included. You call me and you tell me you got a situation, I can help you very quickly identify who the real broker is and at least get you pointed in the right direction. Okay. But seek help anytime you think something is suspicious. Especially if you don't have time to deal with it yourself, because most carriers do not know how to investigate these things in a timely manner. We do it all the time. So by all means, get a hold of us. Let us help you figure that out. And this is not just for carriers, it's also for brokers. Brokers, we can help you too. So this is a response you shouldn't do if you are a carrier stuck in a double broker situation. First and foremost, never hold the cargo hostage. Never, ever, ever. Just don't do it. A lot of carriers rely on an old statute under the UCC. I think it's section 7. I can't remember off the top of my head. I got to pull that up. But it's called lien of carrier, or carrier's lien. And under a carrier's lien, it typically allows a carrier to seize a cargo and sell the cargo in order to recover the cost of transportation. This is a very old law, and it very rarely applies in the digital age. In fact, I would never attempt to invoke the lien of carrier clause unless you are doing it through an attorney. You need to make sure you do that right, because if you screw it up one little bit, you do it, make a step out of sequence, then you could be liable for the value of the entire cargo, whether you claim lien of carrier or not. So make sure you don't screw that up. It's just the best policy in the world not to hold cargo hostage. As soon as you know the right place that it's supposed to go to, get it there. You can always negotiate with the broker throughout transit and even after delivery. Make sure the cargo is delivered. If you want to sit on the BOL, sit on the BOL, but make sure the cargo gets delivered. Frankly, the risk of holding cargo hostage means a freight guard, and we all know how detrimental those are, or possibly even a criminal complaint of cargo theft. And you don't want to be on the receiving end of that conversation. Another thing you shouldn't do as a carrier in this situation is never demand more money than the broker is paying the scammer. So in these types of situations, normally you were offered more money than the load really paid. So the scammer booked the cargo with the real broker, let's say at $2,000. The scammer probably sold you, the carrier who's getting duped, sold you the load at $3,000. You can't sit on the side of the road, figure out who the real broker is, and sit there and say, I'm not moving my truck unless you pay me what I was promised, which was $3,000. You can't do that. Legally, the most that broker is obligated to pay you is whatever they had contracted the load for. So in this particular example, it would be $2,000. Now, it is possible that a broker may pay you a little bit extra for bringing it to their attention, for rescuing the load, returning it under their control. A good broker would typically do that. However, Know your legal limitations. The legal limitation is you cannot demand more money than what the broker was originally booking the load for. So please be very careful, because this can lead to a criminal complaint for extortion if you try to do that. Now, brokers, let's take a look at your responses and the way you need to handle double brokered loads, because you guys are facing a lot of the same problems. And there's no unified methodology within the industry as to how brokers and carriers deal with this, which is why we try to do these videos. We want to try to make sure that we get everybody on the same page so that everyone knows what to expect and how to resolve these situations peacefully, calmly, etc. So if the cargo has not yet been picked up, the easiest thing in the world, of course, if once you've been informed that it's been double brokered, just cancel the load. Just cancel the load. And the ramifications for a broker, however, of doing that is, they may end up losing the customer. There's going to be a delay in finally moving the cargo once they find a real carrier, et cetera, et cetera. But what you don't want is you don't want the scammer to get their hands on the cargo. So cancel the load with the bad carrier if at all possible. Now, what you can do is you can wait for the real carrier to show up to pick up the cargo. Once you can identify who the real carrier is, hopefully while they're there picking up the cargo, and hopefully you're working with your warehouse to verify to you who the real carrier is. Once you do that, then you have a couple of choices. You can try to set up the real carrier in order to haul the load, because they were already hired to do it. They have a truck there. They're real because the warehouse already verified, hey, the guy's here. This is who he is. So you already know they're real. If they passed mustard through the rest of your compliance stuff, and even if they are missing a couple elements on your compliance, you can waive that. You can go ahead, get them set up, renegotiate your rate, and move on. Now, because you go through the process of renegotiating your rate with the real carrier, if the real carrier refuses to haul the load, you're not obligated to provide a TONU. Very nice. Now, if the real carrier does show up, you cancel the load without giving the real carrier any options, then you may be required to pay that real carrier a TONU, because they actually did show up. They showed up for your cargo, and there's some real ramifications there. The jury is out from a legal standpoint on liability, but it is a good practice within the industry to pay that TONU out if a real carrier shows up for a load and you cancel the load on them without negotiating. Now, if the cargo gets delivered and you have not yet paid the scammer, brokers, this is the best situation you could be in. Okay, the cargo gets to the right place, but you don't know who the real carrier is yet. Confirm that the cargo actually got there. Get a copy of the load documents, including the rate confirmation and the BOL that scammer has, as best you can. Especially if you figure out who the real carrier is, you want that documentation. You want to know what that real carrier was told. A great thing to do is to get pictures of the cargo. If carriers are not taking pictures of a cargo when they pick up, take a picture of the seal, take a picture of the BOL and stuff, that's a problem. Carriers, you should be doing that, but that's neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, in order to figure out who the real carrier is, if you haven't paid the carrier you originally hired and you think it's double brokered, you can always request the actual BOL, the pen and ink document, be sent to your office for verification purposes. Because again, the carrier in possession of the physical BOL, the actual document, is the carrier that must be paid, regardless of who your contract is with. Whoever possesses that physical BOL is the one that has to get paid. Not a photocopy, not a scan, not a picture, the actual document. So if you think the load has been double brokered, have all parties claiming that they delivered the load send you the physical BOL. Only one can actually do it. And that's the one that should get paid. Make sure you transfer the load over to the real carrier in your TMS. That way the real carrier gets the credit. Of course, because the load has already been moved, waive any compliance requirements that you have, because clearly the carrier is real, the job got done, everything's good to go, and give the new carrier a rate confirmation. That way they can get paid, and make sure you do it at the same rate as you paid the scammer. I'll talk about this in the stuff you shouldn't do in just a minute, because I've got a bone to pick with a couple of brokers from a couple of years ago. So if the cargo is delivered and you already did pay the scammer, this is when, brokers, you are in a very bad situation. You may have heard the term double pay liability or vicarious liability, because that is the situation that you are now in. Let's face it. You get the power guy showing up at your place saying, hey, you haven't paid the deposit for your power service. You can go ahead and pay me now, or I've got to turn off your power. And he's wearing a power company shirt. He showed up in a power company van and all that stuff. So he seems legit. So you go ahead and you write a check to the guy and you hand it to him. Well, he leaves. And then 20 minutes later, another power guy shows up wearing the uniform, in a truck, etc., etc. And then you come to find out the first guy that got that check from you, he's not really from the power company, but this guy is. It's all about verification. If you pay the wrong person, it does not eliminate your obligation to pay the right person. And 49 CFR 377 is very clear in this. The final mile carrier must be paid. If you pay the guy who is not a final mile carrier, even though you're the one you contracted with him, that's not a good excuse. You still have to pay the final mile carrier. So make sure first you confirm that the cargo has already been delivered. You got the BOL, you got the rate confirmation, got pictures of the cargo, and get all this from whoever is claiming to be the real carrier. I also ask for ELD location information or fuel receipts or something else that can prove that that truck was somewhere along the route of transit during that time frame. ELD information is one of the best things you can use. And again, I always ask for the actual pen and ink BOL. Now, carriers, if a broker asks you for an actual pen and ink BOL in order to prove that you are in fact the carrier of record that hauled the cargo, do yourself a favor. Send it overnight and send it through a means where you can insure the document. Because if the document gets lost, you don't get paid. So make sure that if your load, if your rate confirmation said $3,000, insure the document for $3,000 when you go to ship it. So if it does disappear, you can then collect it back from FedEx or UPS or whoever the heck you sent the document through. I've seen this happen before. That's why I bring this up. That's neither here nor there. Back to you, brokers. Again, double pay liability is in effect. You pay the wrong person, then your customer, by regulation, your customer has to pay the right person. By extension, through vicarious liability, you as the broker representing your customer should be paying the real carrier, which means you're the one who's actually paying twice. Now, again, at most, your exposure in a double pay liability situation is equal to what you paid the scammer. Because you're paying this out of pocket, you're taking a significant loss. But remember, that carrier is also taking a loss, whether they get paid or not. Remember, they're expecting $3,000. You're only paying $2,000. At a minimum, make sure you're paying this guy's costs to make him at least whole. That way, both of you have learned a lesson, because, Mr. Broker, you hired a bad carrier. You need to improve your defenses. And Mr. Carrier, you booked a load that was too good to be true. Both of you are going to learn lessons off of it. So you need to make sure that you balance the hurt across both planes. You can't just tell the real carrier, hey, go pound sand. It doesn't work that way. That really will get you a bad reputation. And again, if that carrier has the pen and ink BOL, they can go to court and they'll win every time. Every time. All right. If the carrier has been impersonated, okay, so not a scammer owned carrier, verify that the carrier was in fact impersonated when they booked a load with you, because you can't, it's, you don't want to put the blame on an innocent party. Okay. So if ABC Trucking books the load with you, you figure out the load's double brokered. Your first instinct, oh, I'm going to freight guard the hell out of ABC Trucking. Was it in fact ABC Trucking? That is the first question you have to ask yourself, because if you throw a freight guard on ABC Trucking and they were impersonated, you are begging for a lawsuit and they will wipe you out. Okay, so pay very close attention to that. Verify that the carrier is impersonated or not. So avoid freight guarding somebody if they're a victim. Contact the shipper for information on the real carrier. If the shipper is doing their job well, they are logging carriers as they're coming in by their real name. The BOLs, if they're signing BOLs at the shipper, it's going to have the real driver's signature on there. A smart driver is actually going to write their name in a legible way above where they sign it, so you can actually read who it is. That is going to help you to track down who the real carrier is by tracking down the driver. In a lot of these cases, the cargo gets stolen. If you think that the cargo is stolen because you've lost the tracking on it or whatnot, first thing you do is alert the FBI or other law enforcement agencies in the area. Give them some basic information. Now, I can tell you also from experience, most law enforcement do not care about cargo theft. Only if you knew exactly where the cargo was and the cargo was there and they can catch the crooks there and get a clearance on the crime right away do they really decide to do anything about it. We know this, but still report it. One, you need the police report for insurance, and two, it'll at least go into the FBI stolen cargo database. So when patterns start picking up about cargo theft rings, you know, it could be that your theft is a missing piece of how one ring operates, and can help the FBI put together a better picture to catch the entire ring and stop them all in one shot. It may not recover your cargo, but at least it'll help defeat the ring as it is. I also recommend to brokers to check the receivers. It's possible that your cargo may get there intact. And if it does, make sure the receiver is recording the information for the real carrier. That way you make sure you're not paying the bad carrier, you're only paying the real carrier. And then once the cargo has been recovered, please make sure you update law enforcement with the fact that you have recovered that cargo. Now, if the shipper has been impersonated, and I alluded to this before when I was talking about carriers, you run into some other complications. Okay, you really need to check with your customer if it's the first time you're working with them. Do they really have the authority of the shipping company to speak on their behalf? Do they have the ability to award cargo? You know, you have a guy who sits there and says, hey, I'm the shipping manager for Pier 1 Imports here at this facility, and I've got these loads for you. Come on in, come pick them up. You know, you're going to take it on blind faith that he actually works for Pier 1 Imports? No, you need to call Pier 1 Imports and say, hey, who is this guy? Do you know who this guy is? And does he have the authority to tender loads? That is very important to do that. I personally, when I was a broker, I liked face-to-face contact with a shipper. Most of my clients were people that I knew personally, were people who were local to me, and I could actually walk into their office, shake their hand, say how they were, ask them how they're doing, that kind of relationship, how strong your connection with the shipper actually is. So credit reference is very important. And when you issue the rate confirmation, you got to understand that the rate confirmation is still a legally binding document. So if you have a fake shipper giving you loads that you are hauling, you didn't know they're double brokered, but he got the load from somebody else, and now he's handed it to you, Mr. Broker, and you think you're the broker of record. The load moves, you figure out that it happens to be double brokered, you are still liable to pay the real carrier for hauling the cargo under the contract and directions that you provided. So you will be out some money in these types of situations. It is extremely important that if you are a small broker, you know who you are doing business with. Do not fall into a shipper impersonation type situation. You will get burned. Now, bad responses for a broker. These are the things brokers should not do in a double brokering situation. Offering the real carrier only what the scammer promised if it is lower than what was promised to the scammer in the scammer's rate confirmation, if the scammer hasn't been paid. I've encountered this actually only once before. So we were offered $700 to haul this one load 400 miles, and this happened 3 years ago. $700. The broker actually promised the scammer $1,000. So the scammer was trying to keep 30% for themselves. So what the broker did was they said, well, you agreed to the scammer for a rate of 700, so I only want to pay you 700. That is very, very, very bad. Okay. You should, in all cases, always pay the carrier what you promised the scammer. Always. Regardless of whether that number is higher or lower than what the scammer promised the carrier, you should always pay the same amount that you paid the scammer. Okay. It's considered fraud if there's excess profit going into your pocket and you do not return it to your customer. That's first and foremost. Secondly, it can result in the carrier invoking the broker transparency law with you and reporting you to FMCSA as a result. You know, no one likes to have investigators, going down their necks, and people may think, oh, FMCSA is so damn busy that they got too few people. They're not doing anything anyway, so I don't care. Look, it's going to happen. Everyone knows broker transparency exists. And if you press the right buttons as a carrier with FMCSA, FMCSA takes notice. And we've seen that with cases against TQL. So keep that in mind, folks. Be careful. Best policy is make sure you pay the real carrier whatever you promised the scammer. That is always the best policy. Another bad response is refusing to pay the real carrier because you have a contract with the scammer. Very bad. There's tons of case law out there that is very clear that if you enter into a contract with a fraudulent party who has no intention of honoring that contract, then that contract's not valid in the first place. So if you book a load with a scammer, you don't have to pay the scammer, regardless of your contract, regardless of the rate confirmation, regardless if the cargo gets to the final destination. You don't have to pay them. They're not the ones who you have to pay. 49 CFR 377 says you have to pay the final mile carrier, not the guy you're contracted with. So the contract's null and void. That's why the clause exists on rate confirmations and in contracts. Anyone who double brokers the load will not get paid. Make sure that's in your contract, please. That will help absolve you of any potential issues that your attorney may think you have in such a situation. Seriously, guys, you can't just not pay a carrier because you had a contract with a scammer. That does not go over well in optics in court, okay? Because this is what happens. The minute you tell a carrier you're not paying him, if he's sitting on the cargo, now, because he does not have the expectation of being paid, he now can invoke the lien of carrier. And I actually have the regulation under here. It's UCC 7307. He can seize the cargo and he can sell the cargo at that point because you're going to refuse to pay him. The final mile carrier, the guy who's actually has the cargo, is the one that must always get paid. To refuse to pay them because you have a contract with a scammer, bad juju. Don't do that. Please don't put yourself in that situation. Another thing you shouldn't do is file a freight guard against the real carrier. Filing a freight guard is unbelievably detrimental. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who sit there and say, well, if you look at Carrier 411's website, it says that they've got a 17% market share among brokers. So if there's a freight guard, they're only blocked from 17% of the brokers that are out there. Yeah, but look at what that 17% represents, okay? That 17% is the brokers who operate on the spot market, which is where this is the problem. Okay, the remaining 83% are brokers with a dual authority, and Carrier 411 doesn't work with a dual authority anyway. They are brokers who have set customers and set shippers, and they don't operate on the spot market at all. So they wouldn't be available for anyone who is operating on the spot market. It's basically brokers operating on the spot market, which accounts of approximately 20% of the brokers that exist in their registrations today. So yes, a freight guard is a damn near total blacklist from the spot market against a carrier. That damage is very, very real. So before you throw a freight guard on a carrier for a double brokered load, make sure that you are putting it, one, the right reason, two, that you are applying the freight guard to the correct entity, especially since today, most of these double brokered loads are based on impersonation. You could be freight guarding a valid carrier that's been working for 20 years with a spotless reputation, and he may not have been in the area where all this took place. You know how many freight guards I've had to help carriers with? They were intra-state carriers on the opposite side of the country. You know, the freight guard case took place in North Carolina, where the carrier only operates in the state of Washington. Someone explain that. What that is that's the broker not paying attention to all the signs as to whether or not the carrier is being impersonated. Before you throw the freight guard down, give it 24 hours, investigate. And if you need help investigating, hello, I help brokers as much as I help carriers. I can help you determine whether or not it's the right call. I can help shield you from that liability, because if you freight guard the wrong person, you can find yourself in court very quick. And I'm dealing with 2 cases right now where I'm an expert witness because the broker freight guarded a carrier improperly. It happens, guys. It happens. So when you're filing a freight guard against a carrier, back solicitation, if you're filing the freight guard, it's a bad idea to file for back solicitation if the broker refuses to acknowledge a real carrier's claim for payment, or if the carrier is reaching out to your customer in that situation. Because remember, the law says at 49 CFR 377, it says that the carrier is supposed to be paid by the consignee or consignor, whoever the beneficial cargo owner is. So if that happens to be your customer and the carrier calls your customer to seek payment, they can do that legally. You can't sit there and go after a carrier you've never worked with before for back solicitation on your load because they hauled the load. No. You let them know, hey, we're the real brokers. Talk to us, not the customer, and then you work it out. But no, you got to take care of things. Now, if the carrier is working through a collections company, a proper collections company like us, then I can tell you what we do is we figure out who the real broker is first. And once we figure out who the real broker is, we give the real broker a chance to indemnify their customer before we try invoking the carrier's rights under 49 CFR 377. So again, no need for a back solicitation freight guard in this case. The carrier, the real carrier, is a victim. They shouldn't be victimized by the broker who is victimized as well. You shouldn't be filing a freight guard against the carrier for holding a cargo hostage if a valid rate confirmation with the real carrier is not in force. So you may be on the phone with the real carrier. Real carrier figures out that you are the real broker. He still has the load on his back. He's going in the wrong direction. And he's still trying to sort out for himself in his own mind, because he has his own due diligence to do as well, that, hey, I don't want to be going the wrong direction. I need to make sure all of this is right. I need to do more verification. You can't sit there and throw a freight guard on a carrier because he's trying to do his due diligence. Okay? Until he has the actual rate confirmation in his hand and he's verified that the rate confirmation is real, he can sit and wait to figure out what's going on. I don't recommend it. I recommend, once we know the right place everything's supposed to go, to proceed on. But if he doesn't know where it's supposed to go and he's not comfortable with what he's hearing, because let's face it, he just got scammed. He doesn't want to get scammed again. He may want to verify. Give him the chance to verify the stuff. It's also not a good idea to file a freight guard against the real carrier for fraudulent activity if the carrier invokes the broker transparency law or any other legal right codified in federal law. There are reasons for these things to exist. There are appropriate ways to use them. There are inappropriate ways to use them. An automatic blacklist for invoking broker transparency because they're trying to deal with a double brokered load or because they were scammed. There's nothing wrong with asking that. He may not give two craps about whether or not or how much of a margin the broker has. Frankly, when I'm in a situation where I have to invoke broker transparency, I don't give a damn about your margin. You can keep all your paperwork about the margin. What I care about is the custody and control of the cargo. Or is the cargo going to the right place? You know, are there situations that such as incidentals and other costs, you know, like detention and whatnot, are these present, and are these being paid for? Those are the kinds of things I might look in broker transparency for. But if you're in the middle of a fraud situation, yeah, you're in a double broker situation, and a broker is asking for transparency, or sorry, a carrier is asking for transparency, what they're trying to do is they're trying to verify that they're not getting screwed. They're trying to verify that they're not getting scammed again, that they're dealing with the wrong broker or something along those lines. They may ask for those records. You can probably redact your financial information from it and the carrier get what they need. It's just better to give information to the carrier when they're asking for stuff than to sit there and force them to invoke something like broker transparency to get that information. Yes, we know you're trying to protect your business. We get that. But come on, there's got to be a line somewhere. So let me back off my broker transparency thing, because that's really not what all this is about. This is about how to handle these fraud cases. But the bottom line is, in most cases, the real broker and the real carrier are both victims. Okay, and both need to be treated as such. They both need to be considerate of each other's situations and the problems that you're all facing. Because if you are a victim of one of these frauds, you are going to lose money in this situation. The goal is to mitigate the loss as much as possible so that all sides come out in a well-distributed place. Yeah, the scammer got their money, they ran off with it, and they're laughing their asses all the way to the bank. I get that. And we're trying to hunt these guys, and we're trying to take care of them. But in the meantime, we still have the real broker and the real carrier who are both taking some kind of a loss. So both parties need to be sympathetic with each other and work with each other instead of coming at each other as broker versus carrier. Guys, we have to work together. We have to, as an industry, we have to work together. Because let's face it, These scammers are counting on conflict between brokers and carriers to sow distrust and to sow dissent so that they can hide in the fog that exists in that rift. That is how they've gotten away with this as long as they have, because brokers and carriers don't trust each other. And as long as there's no trust, and as long as there's no reason to give trust, then these scammers will always win with this fraudulent activity. If you're a victim, be sympathetic with the other victim of the same event. If you're a carrier, be sympathetic to the broker. If you're a broker, be sympathetic to the carrier. Figure it out, sort it out. Let's get everybody as whole as we possibly can, and we all move on. Make sure the incident gets reported, of course. Make sure that the right people are getting the right stuff, of course. But to sit here and try to bash each other over and over again over these situations, it's not helpful. Be considerate of each other. Next week, we're going to talk about preventing double brokerage. And by prevention, I mean procedural steps that we can take before we ever get on the road, before we ever post a load on the boards, to make sure that we can mitigate the chance of a scammer getting control of our cargo. As we go to wrap up, I do have a couple of program reminders. As a reminder, Stop the Scam, our main podcast, is live every Monday, 1 p.m. Central, on all the Lounge Media social networks. So please be sure to check that out. I also invite you to check out the Freight Fraud Task Force. If you are on LinkedIn, go to hashtag Freight Fraud Task Force and pay attention to some of the things that this task force is doing for the industry. There are some good things going on. Active investigations we're not talking about, but we're still getting some good things done. Things that frankly have needed to be done for years, but somebody's finally stepping up and making a difference and trying to get it done. Next week on our show, Stop the Scam, we will have a broker on our show who has been through a cargo theft incident twice in the last 5 years. And by the way, he has successfully recovered the cargo in both cases. We will talk about those cases with this broker on Monday, 1 p.m. Central Time. So please make sure you do not miss that. One more shout out to our sponsor, AccuBid Pro. And they actually have a new commercial that we're going to go ahead and air for you. Again, if you're in a situation where you don't know your cost per mile, you could be in real trouble. Best way to track your cost per mile is through AccuBid Pro.
Tired of spending hours bidding on loads and second-guessing your profits? Introducing AccuBid Pro, the mobile app designed for the everyday owner-operator. We simplify load bidding, making it fast, accurate, and stress-free. Know your operating costs up front to ensure every load is profitable. Plus, for a limited time, enjoy a 30-day free trial. Stop guessing and start earning. Download AccuBid Pro today, available now in the App Store. Bid better with AccuBid Pro.
So if you need help, reach out to me anytime. Double Broker Bounty Hunter, John Cantera. My phone number is on the screen. Email jcantera@vigilanttransport.com. Do not go into these situations alone. You don't have to. There are experts out there who can help guide you through these situations in a hurry. This is actually my cell phone, guys. So you can always text me and I will try to jump in and help you the best that I can as quickly as I possibly can. So do not hesitate to ask for help. Folks, stay safe out there. And whatever you do, don't let scammers take you for a ride. We'll see you again next week.